Hello, everyone. My name is Ida Cutler. I'm a bookseller at Women and Children First, one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States, located in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. Before every event, we acknowledge that the land that Women and Children First is situated on is the land of several tribal nations, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Odawa, the Sac, Fox, Miamia, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee. We recognize these nations as the traditional occupants of the land and its importance for the 65,000 indigenous peoples living here today. Furthermore, it is WCF's mission to use books as tools for liberation and amplify unrepresented voices. And with this land acknowledgement, we recognize the importance of providing books that include information on the ongoing legacies of indigenous peoples, as well as their dispossession and the white settler colonialism that our store has benefited from. On to tonight's event. Tonight it is my supreme honor to be hosting the release of the anthology Fat and Queer. Yay! There's so many wonderful writers who worked on this book, many of whom are in the virtual space with me right now. But for now, I'd like to take a second to introduce our sort of MC for this panel, Bruce Owens Grimm, who is one of the primary editors of the book. Bruce Owens Grimm is based here in Chicago. His essays and reviews have appeared in The Rumpus, Brevity's blog, Essay Daily, Entropy, AWP's Writer Notebook, Iron Horse Literary Review, Literary Confection, Older Queer Voices, Ghost City Review, and elsewhere. He has attended workshops at Tin House, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Vermont Studio Center, and received a Lambda Literary Residency Fellowship to attend the Sundress Academy of the Arts Residency. Before we begin, I just want to say, if you have still yet to order the books, you can do so anytime at womenandchildrenfirst.com. I said books, I meant to say book, but you know what? I'll leave that plural because you should get more than one. Also, I will say that you can click that teal button that says buy book here. And our store is open right now at limited capacity still, so you can come and pick it up. During the event, be sure to drop a question by using the Ask a Question feature, which is located underneath the screen right there. Or you can also drop it in the chat. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Bruce, who's going to introduce the rest of the contributors here with us tonight. I will go off screen. I will be back. Bruce, take it away.
Thank you, Ida, and thank you, Women Children's First. As a Chicago resident, it's really a dream for me for us to be having this launch event here. And as Ida suggested, I also suggest you order multiple copies of the book, because why not? And give them to friends, because everyone's gonna, it's good to be like, hey, let's talk about Fat and Queer. So before I introduce our readers, our first reader for tonight, I'm going to give you just a little information about the Fat and Queer book and sort of its where it came from. Essentially, when Tiff, Miguel, and I were all talking about, okay, how are we going to select work for a book that's about fatness and queerness? Our goal was the whole time what we kept coming back to was that it had to discuss fatness and queerness. It couldn't be one or the other. We wanted to really investigate that intersection of those two identities, and some people weren't happy by that. Just a little tea for you. How did this Fat and Queer adventure begin? I'm going to read a little bit from my introduction to the book to sort of let you know where it began. So 5 years ago, as my fingers shook, I sent an email to Ariel Greenberg pitching the idea of an essay about gaining for her kink series at the Rumpus. It frightened me to write the essay, but her warmth, kindness, and guidance made it possible. This makes it sound easy. It wasn't. How would readers, the writing community, my friends react to me coming out as a gainer? Would I be an outcast? My career over? Well, since I'm sitting here right now, no and no. The book only exists because Ariel and the Rumpus gave my gaining essay, dropping fictions and gaining visibility, space. This book exists because readers connected with it. We need more fat and queer voices. The voices featured here celebrate the intersection of fatness and queerness. This is not a book focused only on gaining, although those voices are represented. The fat and queer experience is as varied as any other, which of course was another thing that we were very set, that was our goal, was like we wanted to make sure we represented a variety of voices. So one of my favorite voices is Edward Kelsey Moore, who will be our first reader for tonight. Edward Kelsey Moore lives and writes in Chicago, where he also enjoys a career as a professional cellist. His short fiction has appeared in numerous literary magazines and has been performed on National Public Radio. Edward is the author of The Supremes Sing the Happy Heartache Blues and the New York Times bestseller, The Supremes at Earl's All-You-Can-Eat, and everybody should also order copies of both those books because they're amazing. Here's Edward Kelsey Moore.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you to Women and Children First for hosting us. I'm going to read from my essay, Lessons Learned and Unlearned. As a musician, I hold fast to the notion that a subpar performance can be redeemed by the ways it teaches me to improve my preparation for the next concert. When I sit at my desk to write, it is with the certainty that each shaky chapter or lackluster short story of the past will enable me to find a clearer way to approach it in the future. I believe that I'm a better husband because I paid attention to the ways in which I was a less than stellar partner in my youth. After years of good and bad concerts, successful and unsuccessful literary efforts, miserable and joyful love relationships, I have come to trust that there is value in even the worst of my experiences, as long as I can glean some sort of lesson from it. Learning can be a complicated and messy process, though. It took me decades to acquire the ability to differentiate between the lessons that I needed to take to heart for my future happiness and those that should be buried before they leap up and bite my ass. When I was 12 years old, I was given my first instruction in how and why to be thin. I had run out of clothes to wear that summer after a lengthy eating binge added 20 pounds to my already stout frame in a matter of months. My mother woke me on a Saturday morning, instructed me to squeeze into the one pair of pants that almost fit, and drove me to a Weight Watchers meeting. By 12, I already knew that I was fat. My schoolmates and my older siblings made sure that I harbored no delusions of thinness. However, I had believed until that morning that my mother and I were on the same side. When I overheard her saying to my aunts that Edward Jr. eats just like a grown man, I can hardly keep up with him, I had heard only pride in her voice. I was an emotional, artistic, and defiantly Nelly boy. I happily spent most of my weekends adding photos to my Diana Ross collage, reading Rona Barrett's Hollywood magazine, I had a subscription, and snacking. Eating was the only thing I did like a grown man as far as I'd ever heard. I had convinced myself that my mother and I had settled into a mutually beneficial arrangement in which she supplied delicious food and I flattered her culinary skills by eating massive, manly amounts of it. That Saturday morning, I discovered that I had been mistaken. My weight was a problem, apparently, and it had to be dealt with immediately. As my mother put it during the drive to that first Weight Watchers meeting, "We have to do something about this now, or you'll start thinking no woman will want you. Then you'll really be in trouble." I'm embarrassed to admit that many years would pass before I gave serious thought to my mother's belief that a woman wanting me, and presumably me wanting a woman, were crucial goals whose achievement merited the reconfiguring of my body. My first Weight Watchers leader, Audrey, was a charming woman with towering lacquered hair that looked like a mass of glistening black cotton candy. At the end of that first meeting, Audrey took me aside and told me the story of a fat friend of hers who had refused Audrey's many entreaties to join Weight Watchers. After suffering the health crisis that Audrey had long seen coming, The friend's fate had been to end up enormous, ill, and immobile, reduced to begging her overburdened caretakers to bring Oreo cookies to her sickbed. "Edward," Audrey said to me while shaking her head sadly, "she just refused to learn her lesson." The day that I met Audrey, I didn't know that there would be countless weight loss attempts in my future. Most would be marked by promising beginnings and disheartening endings. Some would be dangerously unhealthy. None achieved or could have achieved the unreasonable results I'd envisioned. I never managed to starve myself into heterosexuality. Unlike Audrey's friend, though, I learned my lessons. I learned to view each uncompleted stab at shedding fat as a personal failure. I learned to see myself as physically unattractive and lacking in resolve. Strangers, schoolmates, and even people who claimed to love me reinforced those feelings, and I absorbed them more deeply every time I stepped onto a scale. It took decades for me to tire of beating myself up, but I eventually started dodging my punches. With middle age approaching, I took a closer look at some of the uglier lessons I had learned and at the people who had taught them to me. While I can't claim to have completely shed the self-sabotaging beliefs I drilled into my soul for decades, new lessons have presented themselves to me and over time crowded out many of the old ones. After half a century of trial and error, I have learned to be thankful for every version of the body that has carried me from adventure to adventure. I can work toward better health, whether that comes with a more compact frame or not, and still love my body for what it has done and continues to do for me. I have learned that when anyone other than my physician offers an opinion about my body, what they are really saying is they want me to be smaller in some other way. They are saying I should be less successful, less gay, less Black, less smart. The motivations and messengers change, but the goal is always to lessen me, and it is rarely for my benefit. I have learned that whatever amount of space I take up, I have the right to occupy. Thank you.
I was clapping as if you could hear me when I was muted. That was wonderful. Thank you, Ed. And I have to say that when we were first discussing contributors that we wanted for this book, for me, Ed was one of the people that I couldn't imagine this book without. So,
thank you.
To have him in this book and to have him reading with us tonight is really great and special for me.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, so next up we have J. Audrey. J. Audrey is a poet, novelist, a survivor, and a lot of other things they haven't yet discovered, but are constantly trying to. They earned their degree in creative writing from Columbia College and have no idea what that's supposed to mean or show about them. Their work is about the connection between pain and joy, trauma and truth, self and other. Please welcome J. Audrey.
Hi, everyone. First, I never know how to write a good informative bio, so if you want to see my other work, connect with me on social media, whatever, you can go to linktree/jaudrey. You can watch my terrible TikToks. I'll put that link in the chat if you want to know more about me. I have 2 not-so-long poems to read, so I am going to talk a little bit first about what they mean to me and how I came to write them. So, going into this project, I knew that I wanted to talk about food. Fat people are really often expected to be ashamed and secretive about the foods that we eat. We learn intuitively that being fat means to never suggest getting food first, to only post the salads and the vegetables on social media, to keep the joy of food behind this curtain of shame. Both of these poems are celebrations of eating and consuming apologetically as well as an acknowledgement of how food is tied to both generational trauma and sexuality. I also wanted to write about the transformative power of fat queer relationships. We often feel obligated to vie for the attention of thinner partners, or at least that was the case for me my whole life. When I finally started dating someone who was also fat and queer, there was like a major shift in my life. It's incredibly healing to see yourself reflected in someone else and to realize how easy it is to love the soft curves of your partner when you've always hated your own. There's a depth of understanding and intimacy there that I think is unmatched, at least for me. And I apologize for my background noise. I have my window open. So that's what these poems are about. And I will start with, if we let this plane pass for 1 second. There it goes. I'm going to start with the shorter poem, which is called Cherry Popsicle. Cherry juice on her skin drips down through her valleys, her slopes and hills. Our ripened, plump bodies seem to have been made for the kiss of light. The lick of cherry, I crave her. She is an August landscape, firefly freckles, butterfly lashes. I cannot catch her unless she lets me. Her smile, the taste of a daisy, sun on water, liberates my hands from their tentativeness. She is all red and sticky and sweet and spreading herself on me too. My canyons and shorelines. I have never been held like this, the sacred way a popsicle is lusted over on a summer day. And the second one, which is a bit longer, is 7 Nights of Noodles. Sunday, I realize I have new stretch marks across the top of my stomach. Reddish purple like an overripe raspberry. I have thrown out my scales by now, but honor this gain by making a rich beef broth for stroganoff. My mother would pre-portion it on my 10-year-old plate. I eat it in heaps. Monday, I have her, over, and sit with a glass of crisp rosé as she tosses shrimp, mussels, crab with lemony linguine. The steam collects on her forehead like sweat as she concentrates, the same look as when she grips the headboard. Tuesday, I discover a new recipe tucked inside a secondhand book. It has tamarind paste, scallions, biting red chilies that coat my tongue, and we are alone in my kitchen, me and my appetite. It tastes of a piece I never knew until she held my round woman hips and thanked me for my abundance. She studies art history and points out that my stomach rolls like Aphrodite's. Wednesday, I marinate chicken thighs as the afternoon sun dies out the window. I'm picking away at work that needs to be done while they soak up garlicky, buttery goodness. The recipe calls for breasts, but thighs have the fat, and so the flavor. Her thighs are all the glory of the world. The pasta will drink up the schmaltz, and it will be worth the heartburn to taste. Thursday, she tells me I only need 5 ingredients for the best pasta I'll ever eat. Finally, she trusts me enough to share the secrets passed down by her mother's mother's mother, listing them off one by one, the way she counts the freckles on my neck with her lips. Black peppercorns, guanciale, fava beans, pecorino, and, of course, her favorite, bucatini. Bucatini. If my want for her had a taste, it would be this, and she is right. It's the best I ever had. Friday, I'm joined by one of the friends made in the latest group therapy session. We are making carbonara, which I say slowly, over and over. Let the savory yolk word burst on my taste buds. I invited him over because his mother is like mine, all harsh corners and skipped desserts, so it's no wonder we've ended up here, together, afraid of adding too much fat. To eat, to savor, is to regain all that has been taken from us. Saturday, I visit with my mother, promising to make my famous recipe for dill yogurt orecchiette with spiced lamb.
And and that actually shocked me because I really thought I was done with that. I know now that I'll never be done with that, but so it was a really nice thing to get the opportunity to submit this essay and to address that again and think for a moment about what being fat and queer has brought into my life. And it was ultimately, of course, a very, very positive thing, because I'm thankful for both things. It's given me a perspective on the world that I would not do without for anything. It's a wonderful thing.
Awesome. Yes, I will agree all that as well. So then we have a question from, hey, Derek. This question's from Derek. Derek's not just appearing in the chat. Wants to know, what was the process like in editing such a unique collection and assembling the eventual book? TJ, do you want to talk a little bit about that? I'll talk about that too, but we can start with you.
Yeah, so the editorial process was like really fun once we got into a rhythm. What is like really fruitful about it is when we were selecting stuff and then, we wanted to work, with particular contributors on edits, we kind of like each assigned, like Bruce would take some folks, Miguel would take some folks, I would take some folks. And one of the most like delightful exchanges that came out of the editorial process was I was leaving comments on someone and I'm like, hey, can you like make it a little bit more like queer here? Or, can you really, I see what you're trying to say. And can you like embrace this joy in being fat and being queer here that, your story is clearly telling. And they had written back to me and they're like, this is why it matters having a fat and a queer editor. And they were saying how they had submitted that piece to other places and it just wasn't clicking with editors because you did not have that level. You did not have someone who was fat understanding it. You did not have someone who was queer. You did not have someone who was both of those intersecting identities. So that was really amazing. And I think, as we continue through the editorial process, just what blew my mind is that people were writing for the anthology and, just how, just the profoundness of how raw and real these pieces were. It was just palpable that, everyone like genuinely wanted to be in this anthology and they were writing particularly for it. And I think that was incredibly, incredibly moving.
Yeah, and a lot of the sort of the cover letters that we got for the submissions here, expressed that this was the first time they were writing about their fatness and their queerness together, and sort of that's and the nervousness that comes with that, like, because it is, that's how I was when writing. I say that as if it's a past tense sort of thing. It's still writing anything, you get a little nervous, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But it was especially that way when I started writing about fatness. So, and especially being like, like I like, it's a goal for me to be fat, like, it's not like just, oh, hey, I'm fat, I'm going to accept it as, whatever. It's something I'm like seeking out. But also just for, in terms of putting the collection together and assembling it, I will tell everybody and anybody who ever asks that the importance of Post-its. I wish I had already the picture of what my wall looked like when we were organizing the book once we selected everything. And we were on Zoom calls. Oh, I see Miguel. But we were on Zoom calls like pretty much every day right before our deadline, saying how do we group these together, and everything was on a Post-it. So Post-its, everybody, Post-its.
And color-coded spreadsheets as well.
Yes.
That was integral.
Yes, these are the two big things.
Sorry.
And we have Miguel now. Yay! So, all right. So
can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear us?
You can't hear me.
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
I can see.
Oh. Let me see. We can hear you. Miguel? Miguel, can you hear us?
I can't hear you.
Oh, We can hear you. Just read, Miguel. Well, that was Miguel, everybody. I wish we could hear him read because he has really great stuff in the book too, obviously, and to get his insights on some of these questions.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? No.
Hello? The ghost of Miguel Morales has returned. Miguel? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. This is what I guess what it feels like a live event is like with technology and all that. All right, so our next question comes from Philip. Hi, Philip. Question for anyone on the panel. Is writing about yourself as embracing fat more difficult than being out/coming out as queer? We'll start with TJ.
I saw that question in the chat, and my first thought was, I would rather come out 10 more times than write about being fat. No, but for real, I definitely would not have written this piece if it weren't for fat and queer. And even it literally took me months to write because I just did not. It was just so raw and real and personal. And to just take a page out of Miguel's book, one thing that was also incredibly difficult when we were kind of thinking of some dream contributors that we would have liked to have seen in the anthology, or if we were reaching out to people to be like, hey, we're working on this, we think you may be interested in submitting a piece. One of the struggles that came with that is is it okay to essentially call someone fat by being like, hey, would you like to submit to this fat and queer anthology? And there's this just such negative connotation and this shame that comes with being fat, which I think that when you embrace your queer identity, it's really something that is so incredibly empowering, especially if it's something that you hide for so long. But I feel like there was that different level when it came to addressing your fatness. And I think it's also one thing that is so incredibly important with being queer is just having a support system and having allies. And sorry, just to shout out a bit because I see some of my coworkers here. Really the reason why I was able to fully come out of my life and fully come out of my family is because I had that support system at my job actually. And I knew that okay, I'm coming out of my family tomorrow and it could go really bad, but at least when I get up and go to work on Monday, I'll have, that support system. I'll have my coworkers. And I think it's a lot harder to find that support system when you're fat, especially since it's so ingrained that if you're fat, that means you must be unhealthy, or, oh, aren't you concerned, or are you going to your doctor? So it's really fascinating. So there was something incredibly liberating and powerful embracing it alongside being queer.
Awesome. Jay or Ed, either one of you wanna
I will
react to that?
Has been more difficult for me personally to embrace being visibly fat than it was to embrace being visibly queer. I mean, I've experienced my fair share of homophobia and transphobia. I'm sure we all have, and that sucks, and that's really hard. But I've never experienced the amount of pushback for my queerness that I have for my fatness. I mean, I recently had a TikTok go semi-viral where I talked about thin privilege, and people were screen recording it to talk about their goal weights and losing weight and using me as fatspo. And it's horrifying, the visceral hatred people have for fat people. And a lot of the times, even other fat people who haven't gone on that journey, I know I've had to kind of muscle a lot of my friends to fat liberation and fat acceptance in order to keep them supportive of me and feel safe around them. You have to do a lot of work. emotional labor wise to be visibly fat and embrace that in your life?
Yeah, it's difficult to compare the two things for me. I'm a generation older than any of you, and I have had sort of a longer amount of time to deal with both issues, and so I definitely I see how I have zero problem at this point in my life with expressing my anger at someone who is negative towards me for being gay. It is, whether that person, whoever that person is. I still find myself at this point in my life, if someone expresses something, a very, fat phobic, emotion or says something to me that's very fat phobic, I still find myself, there's a moment where I hold it back before the anger comes out. And so I think it's harder. The facing the fat phobia is tougher, and even at this point in my life. And even though I could sit down, and say to myself, well, I feel good about who I am and where I am, and all the things in my life are working together at this point. I still find myself, there's that moment where I can be pushed into doubting my conviction that I'm okay. So it's an ongoing thing. I would love to say that it was done, and I every now and then fool myself into thinking that it's done, but no.
Mm-hmm. I totally understand that. Like I have the same thing. That's like we have this book, I have this essay. Like I should have no problem being out as fat. But then there's those moments where it's like, oh, okay, like I question sort of like, why am I can I really be as comfortable and out as fat as I want to be, or like think that what I write about suggests I can be? And especially, I think being in new situations around, like I started a new job, and it's like that I'm going to walk in and be like, "Hey, everyone, I like being fat. Like, how's it going?" Like, but then there's, luckily so far where I work, there's not as much diet talk as other places I've worked. But I had a job right out of grad school where one of my coworkers and I were in we were in South Africa for a conference, and when we got back to the hotel, we were waiting for the elevator. She's like, "Let's take the stairs so you can lose some weight." And I was like, "Who said I wanted to lose weight?" And I said that to her, and she was like, "Well, why wouldn't you want to lose weight?" And I was like, "Well, our day is over, so let's sit down and talk about it." But I mean, I think another good example of this difference is, I mean, my coming out as queer is a whole other story, because I was married for 9 years. I was in a heterosexual marriage for 9 years, and then came out. So there was a whole thing there, obviously. But once I came out, it was much easier to come out as queer than fat. Like a really great example of this, and I just had to deal with this a couple of weeks ago, is my mother has no problem with me being queer. She has a big problem with me being fat, and especially embracing being fat, to the point where she won't even acknowledge this book exists, because she's so embarrassed about it being about fatness. So, her and I don't talk very much anyways, and we certainly aren't going to after that last conversation. But, that's, I think a good example is like, because my brother is queer as well, but he goes to Orange Theory, and she loves that and like all this stuff. So she has no problem with the queerness; it's the fatness. But
can I tell you just one little thing, Bruce?
Yeah.
I have, every now and then I look back and I think, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I think about the things I feel bad about, and and one of them is years ago, I met this guy who had told me that he had just lost a lot of weight. And we had this lovely conversation. He was a charming fellow. And we had this lovely conversation. And I remember saying, oh, oh, good for you. That's so great. It's so hard to do. And I'm just, and being so, oh, how wonderful for you that you lost all this weight. And I remember leaving that at the end of that evening and thinking, why did I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't I just say, you look great, and leave it at that?
Right.
Why did I need to go in this whole thing, encouraging him and saying, how wonderful for you that you changed your body entirely to something new. That person was you, Bruce.
Oh.
I don't know if you remember it.
don't remember.
That was you. And I remember at the end of that evening, leaving there going, oh, why the hell did I do that? Why did I say that? And every now and then I think about that. And just at other times when someone has told me, I lost all this weight. And to me, the appropriate response is, good for you. Do you feel good about yourself? Do you feel great? I hope you feel wonderful. You look wonderful. And that's it. Not, oh, isn't it better to be thin?
Which is what we always talk about when we see each other.
So, yeah, exactly. Now I know I just need to give you an old fashioned.
Yeah, like, here you go. Well, I mean, that's funny because every time when I think about us getting together, I'm always, it's like, well, we're always like eating really good things and like having wine and like it's always like super fun, so you don't have to think about that anymore in the middle of the night.
Thank you.
I know
there's so many other things I can think about.
That's right. Focus on something else. I'm sure this is what you wanted this evening to be about, is me absolving you of the.
Finally.
Yeah. But I mean, now that you bring that, I remember now that I don't remember you specifically saying that, but I remember that time in my life where I was losing weight. But like I guess because that whole health like thing like that doctors put on us that that is good to, I was like, oh yeah, I need to lose weight for my health and I'm doing that and blah, blah, blah. Although, what I didn't think about then was thinking about now, because of course, I've been told recently I should be losing weight, is like the mental health factor of that is like, not that it will be like, I'm not going to listen to anything my doctor says, but like, there needs to also, I have had to be more open with my doctors saying, for me to feel good about myself and not having this sort of, I don't want to call it panic, but it's like, I don't feel like me, if I'm thin or trying to lose weight, I think, it's for opening up that definition of what is healthy. Like, you can be fat and be healthy, and it's easily as you can be thin and unhealthy. So I think that's that thing we have to undo. But yeah, Edward Kelsey Moore bringing the shockers tonight.
Yeah, that was a plot twist.
But thank you for saying that. Miguel, can you hear us now?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Oh my god! Good thing I wasn't picking my nose or something. I was like,
plot twist number 2.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
No one touched any buttons, turned anything off. Let's just let Miguel finally read his.
Well, I know that we're short on time, and I just really wanted to read the dedication of the book because I think that really underscores what this whole thing is about. It says, this book is dedicated to the fat and queer and fat and trans community, to our elders whose work led us to this moment, and to the youth who will inspire us to keep moving forward. So, yeah. It's good to finally see all of you, and I've, just reading the words that we've been editing and then actually seeing voices and hearing them read the words that came to life and made us want to put it in the book, and now make us even more sure that that was the right decision. Yeah, it's really just wonderful. It was a little frustrating, but I was listening and I was watching, and yeah, it was really great to see our contributors be in the spotlight, which is what this book was all about. So that was really exciting to see.
All right, so our last question for the night, Miguel, I'm gonna actually ask of you. Since, but someone wanted to know if we got enough entries for a volume 2 in the future.
I mean, I think right now there's enough interest where people are saying, "Oh, I wish I would have submitted," and I didn't know the deadline was so soon, even though we tattooed it on our bodies and everything. I think there's definitely an interest for another anthology. Whether we bring in other editors or we reconfigure our team, or like if I'm just a contributor, because I know it's a lot of work to be an editor, and then we've all got projects on our own that we're working on. So I think there will be another volume 2. We're just gonna have to figure out like the logistics of it and clear our calendars and when can it work. But our press was interested. I guess we can go ahead and maybe say that Andrew said, yeah, we're really interested in anything you guys have to offer. So, so I mean, we need to discuss that. But I mean, I don't know what Tiff and Bruce think about that. I mean, we've kind of discussed it, but not really in length.
No, I was just gonna say, like, it started off as a joke that we're like, oh, if we do a second one, we could call it like Too Fat, Too Queer with like the number 2 there. And like it was a joke at first, but now we're like, oh, but what if? So I think that's definitely something like to keep percolating in the background, and just, and I think like, it's even so evident from just this event. Like, sometimes when a project like this is, it's just, before it releases, you're kind of, you don't know how it's going to be received, like, oh man, is anyone really going to like get smacked with the feels when they read this? But just seeing like all of the voices that are already resonating with it, I think there is definitely potential for there to be like a second version. And then like Miguel said, it's just working out the logistics.
Yeah, I would totally be up for doing a second one with both of y'all. I just need a vacation first. It's a lot of, I mean, this is nothing to do with the two of them. I mean, it is just a lot of work. And so and I need to buy more Post-its. So after that, I'll be all ready to go. So yeah, I definitely, in terms of, did we get enough submissions? I mean, we got a lot of submissions, but like we said, our goal was that you had to explore the intersection of fatness and queerness together. We wanted both of those, and so if you're thinking of for volume 2, and so, start thinking about what you're writing, you might submit to us. That's what we're looking for. I mean, there's certainly the interest. So
yeah, I would say like one of the things that we learned as editors was the sooner you turn your stuff in, the more time we as editors have to work with you and get a piece where it needs to be. We got a lot of really good submissions at the last moment, but we were like, it's going to take another week or two working, and we're like at the last day. So we had to let go of some really good potential pieces, but who knows, maybe they're still out there. And then some people kind of wrote a story and we were reading it, our poem, and then it didn't have an ending. And we were like, well, what happened to it? They were in the middle of their story, right? They haven't written the ending yet. So maybe when this book comes out and a year or two passes and COVID, has run its course on all of us, maybe they can finish the story that they wrote to us. They wrote something that was in progress. And I think a lot of them didn't see that, oh, my story hasn't come to an end, or this part of the story hasn't come to an end. So that's one of the things when you write your experience, is that it needs to be kind of like a complete package before you go on to the next chapter. of that experience. But yeah, it was a really good experience. Yeah.
Miguel, to your point, we learned like so much in the editorial process for this. And I think, you know, like we also learned a lot that, you know, there is a difference between like the writer's deadline and like the editor's deadline. So I think, you know, if like hypothetically, if we were to do a second one, like we definitely can build in that time to have it so that that last deadline, we can have it so that if there are pieces that still need a bit more work, we can build in that hammer time into it. But I'm like sitting here being like, yeah, I completely agree. As the writer who submits things at like 11:59 at night, I'm not saying that I did that this past weekend, but I did. But definitely, for the sake of your editors, definitely submit your stuff early if you can.
Yeah, and I will say, well, I don't know if you heard earlier, Miguel, but I described TJ as our house mother. And so we would have TJ. TJ came
to work.
TJ came onto the project a little bit after Miguel and I had started accepting submissions and stuff. And TJ was like, "All right, here we go. Let's get some organization going here." So we would also have that from the beginning this time. So.
But I'm also so incredibly thankful for that because, like, you know, like as we were talking about, you were saying that you would have people who were like, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in submitting," and then wouldn't submit. Like, I think I would have been one of those people if y'all didn't invite me to join to help as, you know, as an editor. Because now I'm like, oh damn, now I do have to write something. So so again, it's just been such an incredibly fulfilling experience to have had the opportunity to have joined you guys to co-edit this book, and to just see the community that it's bringing together, and you know.
Yeah. So this book, we really wanted to send the message that it's a celebration of being fat and queer and fat and trans in our bodies, and there's some stories of trauma and stuff like that. But overall, the arc of it is, let's celebrate the space that we're in. You know, maybe if we do a volume 2, we can start telling more of the stories where people learn the ins and outs of their bodies and how, you know, we're fetishized, and a little more of the complications of it. Because we did get a couple of pieces, more than I liked actually, where people wrote about how they didn't like their bodies and how they were uncomfortable and how they wanted to surgically do things to their bodies, and that is their choice to do. But this particular book was about celebrating the body as it is. So, you know, once that celebration happens, which is now, maybe we can start looking at more complex issues of being fat and queer and fat and trans that also have to deal with racism and bodyism and, you know, in the community. I mean, we've touched on a lot of those things, so it can go in any direction. But just like our freshman project was just about, let's just establish ourselves and give voices to people who have never had a voice, who never had permission to have to speak. So that's what this is.
Yeah, and like we had so many people who were writing into us, that submitted to us, were saying, I've never written about this before, like, you know, I think I said that before. But, you know, that was, you know, really exciting. And we also took that responsibility very seriously. You know, we were giving this space to people, but, and wanted it to be a safe space. But, all right. So I think we're at time. So Miguel, thank you. I'm so glad Miguel was able to join us. In case you forget what it has looked like, here it is. Hit that buy the book button. And thank you.
And the cupcake.
And a cupcake. The cupcakes are so cute. Thank you so much for coming out. And I'm so sorry that we had some technical troubles. Crowdcast, I don't know. Sometimes I probably shouldn't say it on their platform. Maybe they'll like dox me. Yes. Thank you all so much for coming out. And thank you to everyone who watched. And really inspired by the work and what was said. So I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming. And have a good night and a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.